I know, I said I would create a new character, but for those who follow me for a bit longer know that I can't just exit the path I've chosen and I have to throw myself against the problem until it works. So over the last week, more or less, not entirely, but over the last half week since the patch destroyed Cast on X stuff, I was further working on Cast on X stuff. And in the background, we're seeing me clearing a tier 10 map. I pushed up to tier 14 by now. I tried 2 citadels, but got one shot by white mobs. So, yeah, the build is not perfect yet, but I want to take a look with you at what I have achieved so far with the character and how I've done that. And for that, I say morning is Mon here, and let's take a look at my Infernalist, which barely uses 2 Ascendancy points, but as you can see, I'm using Frostbolt in this setup, and after this, we're skipping through in a moment, I will show the gear I am using right now, because I am about to change a lot of the gear, but I do not just want to show a 500 Exalt version of the build, and want to provide a version that is cheaper and works fairly well up to, like, I'd say up to tier 10 maps. It works very, very good. The problem is that just white mobs and stuff are too dangerous right now in the game, so I try to get armor into the mix. So I try to play an Infernalist that uses cold and lightning and fire skills, and then has armor and needs about 200 intelligence, 350 strength, and 100 dexterity to work, which is a crazy expensive way to build a character. So let's just see how I more or less delete the boss. You can see I do not use a lot of stuff before I am using my single target. I could have shocked him before, I could have used my my curse before, so there still is a lot of damage potential here. But as I said, I'm using Frostbolt for clear with the Snake Pit Ring, which which makes it so that it cannot pierce, which is very important for Frostbolt, because Frostbolt is extremely bad without that, because it just flies through the enemies and does nothing. With this setup, it loses its it cannot how it's called, it cannot pierce, you know what I mean. It loses the line always pierces enemies, which means that it hits an enemy and then either forks or chains, depending which side of the snake pit you're using. Both of these work in different situations, so I do sometimes swap this side, and then it gives the Frostbolt the explosion immediately, either when it hits a second enemy or when no other enemy is around. It will explode right on the spot on the first enemy, because it cannot chain when there is no enemy nearby, so it just explodes on the enemy hitting it, which makes it a lot smoother for clearing. Then I'm using a cast on freeze setup, which I will show in a moment, or 2 cast on freeze setups and 2 cast on ignite setups, and an elemental invocation setup, which is why I have so much spirit. But the spirit stuff will change with the rework a bit, so we'll have to wait a moment to see the new version that works even better. But yeah, as I said, I want to show the version that I pushed with and felt very good with. Last thing before we jump into the actual character, I have to give a shout out to a guildmate here who would hate it if I name him, so I don't. But I have to give the shout out because he gave the idea with the snake pit and the idea with the bow setup, which were the 2 things that kept me away from Insanity, and probably was the only reason I did not actually reroll the character, because you tried these things and I've seen the opportunity I am using right now. So yeah, let's take a look at an actual character. It is an Infernalist, which I mostly am using for Pyromantic Pact, which removes your mana and gives you Infernal Flame. This means that whenever your mana fills up, you're taking damage equal to 100% of life and energy shield, which is one of the reasons why I want to get rid of my energy shield. All it does is make me take more damage. And then I want to get my fire resistance up into the 85, maybe even up to 90, but I'm not sure if I can do that yet. And then what we want to do is get a lot of recoup, because this does count as a hit, which means when we stack recoup, I do have about 72% recoup right now, because there's 15% elemental recoup that is not counted here, which then gives us our life over time. This is very important because we do not have life regeneration on until soon when I swap the gear, but that will be extremely expensive as I said, so I want to show it before. Then we're using Frostbolt, and the fun thing about Frostbolt with ice, with Frostwall is that when we are not using the ring, we just shoot through and damage the Frostwall, and then the Frostwall explodes eventually. But if we're using the Snake Pit, right side is the chain +1 times. The Frostbolt actually explode on the walls, which help a lot with single target when you do not have your elemental invocation up. Then on the left side it would be the fog variant. This works very well as well. Explodes slightly behind, so for killing rares and stuff, Snake Pit on the left with fog is a better interaction with Frostbolt, but the damage of the Frostbolt is not insane. It doesn't work so greatly a single target, because even though it's my absolute clearing skill that only has like 3.3k DPS, this goes quite a bit higher with stuff like Ambush, 100% increased crit chance against, more crit chance against full life, and it does overlap with the explosion. It does then also trigger Eye of Winter, which makes the enemy be more vulnerable to crits, which is important for rares and bosses. And then we have the Cold Snap custom freeze, which triggers where the Frostbolt freezes the enemy. So when we can see it in the video I've posted, when the Frostbolt freezes an enemy, then at that location, Cold Snap is cast and explodes and deals damage in an AoE again. And Cold Snap deals a lot more damage here. This at not shown here because I'm going out with Spell Cascade, but Fetus and Energy Retention make it trigger extremely often. Also because it does only have a cast time of 0.5 seconds. And energy gain on meta skills is reliant on the base cast time of the skill. So for Cold Snap, it is enough to like freeze a couple of white enemies to trigger, which is what the build mostly struggled with. I can show quickly here. Because a lot of people said, well, the trigger stuff is dead because it does not work on normal enemies anymore at all, which is kind of true, but kind of is not for this version, because you can see this is 57 on just one. Actually, wait, let's out here. How much we get? Need one white enemy. Hello? Please? Okay, this is 2. You see, I've frozen one enemy and get 98%. 98% per white enemy frozen. So this custom free setup will cast Cold Snap whenever you throw your Frostbolts into a group of enemies and they will explode. So this is a very, very good clear setup actually, which only has the problem that single enemies can be very annoying. You might need to put a Frostbolt for a white mob there to shotgun it, or you have to use your elemental invocation, which I still am using with Comet. I do also have the single target setup Incinerate with Comet, here with Comet and Ball Lightning for the shocks, and the Ball Lightning does also trigger elemental invocation very quickly, which is one of the reasons why I likely will go away from the Incinerate self-cast and go into the Ball Lightning self-cast, because I do think it works even better against single target. Though Incinerate did get me where I am right now, so I do have to mention it. Incinerate works fairly well, especially with the supports mobility, momentum, searing flame, and control destruction. All of these just work very well with it because it cannot crit, so we just take the more damage. You have more ignite magnitude, which makes it get more stacks for elemental invocation, and your casting ignites more quickly. Momentum gives more damage after using or after walking 2 meters, which is more or less instantly, or at least when the incinerate is stacked to the damage we want it to. And then we have mobility, which makes it deal less damage, but we can move a lot faster while using the skill. You see, I am still moving slower, but not nearly as much as when, let's say, I'm using Frostbolt here. So this is a very good variant. And then we have Fortress, Glacier, and Glaciation on the Frost Wall. Glaciation is not really needed, but I did have an open slot, so I put it in there. We have Cold Snap with Spell Cascade, Impetus, and Energy Retention, as I said. The Eye of Winter with Wild Shards and Deceleration for the chance to inflict critical weakness. Then we have Hypothermia with Persistence, Focused Curse, and Heightened Curse for a better Hypothermia. And then we have the Cast on Ignite, Comet, Inevitable Crit, and Super Critical, just to nuke bosses when we are using our Incinerate. We have Ball Lightning with Conduction and Overcharge to get a lot of shocks on the enemies. And then we have the Frostbolt with Scattershot, Ambush, Magnifying Field, and Arcane Tempo. This setup really is only for throwing Frostbolts very quickly, which then clear the enemies away. Our main single target damage is Elemental Invocation with Comet, Concentrated Effect, Spell Echo, and Capacitor, which works extremely well. In a longer boss fight, I would not use Capacitor, I do think, because it does not provide direct damage, but better burst. So, as long as you're one-shotting the bosses with Elemental Invocation, you should use Capacitor, but against the real endgame enemies, likely I would change, where is it? Impetus up there to get faster energy, which is more damage in the end. Then for the clearing setup, we are using a Widow, Hail, and Quiver setup. On the Quiver, all you are looking for is projectile speed, +2 all projectile skills, and gain life per enemy killed. I do have dexterity in addition, which is nice and solves some issues, but you do not need dexterity. For the bow, you want at least 200% of increased quiver power, so that the +2 projectile skills goes up to +6. With a 250 quiver, you are getting +7 out of the quiver, and it does boost your projectile speed by a lot. I then do have Soakers of Ascapar in here, but these are by no means necessary. As you see, I do have 45 spirit here, and I have 72 match. I am currently using this because I want to replace my body armor, which gives spirit, and without the bow I would not be able to replace it with a very good armor version. So this is just for the future, and you do not need these soul cores because they are very, very expensive. They cost like 42 exalts each when I bought them. Then we are using just a lot of gear with life, spirit, resistances, really nothing special here. Stats here and there. And then we have the amulet, which just gives resistances or special skills, and again some spirit and stats and a lot of rarity. This is all just get the stats to fix your character, nothing too mandatory here aside from just fixing your character and stats. That's the big problem of the character, because you need a lot of dexterity, strength, and intelligence. For strength, you need, you don't need as much strength. You could play a dexterity variant where you just push dexterity gear and go for evasion, but I wanted to go for some armor because I do think it works better against white enemies. Then for the single target setup, I am using a scepter which just provides a lot of spirit to then get a lot of damage out of Woven Focus. This is a very, very cheap setup to get a lot of damage from, because you can get like a 190 or 180 spirit scepter without other stats. You don't need any stats aside from the spirit on the scepter, because they don't grant you anything. For like 1 or 2 exalts, and then you get the shield for 1 exalt. So this is a setup that provides a lot of damage for very, very little investment. Later on, you want to go for a wand with +4 cold skills, a lot of crit, spell damage, cold damage, mana, etc. All the good stuff, maybe cast speed even, and for the focus, the same stuff. So later on you would want to go for a rare setup, but here a scepter plus focus setup works very well. Then for the tree, we are, as I said, running recoup a lot. Could go recoup here as well, but I don't have the points yet. Then we want the cold stuff and the general elemental stuff and all the trigger stuff here. Then for the setup with the bow, I went for the projectile nodes here, the projectile nodes here, and the AoE here to give it way more better clear. And for the red side, I went for getting these elemental nodes, which are very, very good. And then getting a lot of nodes here, getting the crit here, and then just fixing attributes, which I currently am having trouble with. So this pretty much sums up the entire build. And if you have any questions, I'm sorry this was not a well-prepared video, but I want to just talk about the character. But if there's any questions coming up, feel free to let me know. And thanks for watching. See you in the next one.